Hi, everyone. I'm Mark C. Crowley, and I am the author of Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. Today on the show, we're going to talk about a potential recession and why it would be an absolute disaster for managers to seize back power that they perceive to have lost during this past 2 years. We're going to talk about the science on why people need to marinate in positive emotions in order to excel at work. And I'm going to share the most inspiring thing you can say to people who work for you, even when we are potentially on the brink of a recession. So we're going to do that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty, our podcast. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. Now, let me ask you, from a neuroscience point of view, what do you think matters more in leadership? Is it the heart or the brain? Well, there's a pretty good chance that your answer was likely the brain. But I wonder if you'd be surprised to learn that scientifically speaking, actually, it's the heart that's more important. But let me be clear, when I talk about leading from the heart, I'm not talking about some woo-woo spiritual stuff. We're talking about highly scientifically researched value that you could actually add. So what is this elusive science of the heart, and how does it impact leadership? Well, that's where we're going on the next 2 episodes. As always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please, do us a favor, get over to wherever it is that you tune in to the podcast from, whatever app it is. And we really need it and appreciate your help if you can do a rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you give us those 5-star ratings and write a review, it really helps. And you know, we're working hard to bring you great shows every week, and we really appreciate it when you just give us that little bit of feedback. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right. Let's strip it down and dive right in. One of the latest trends in leadership is to try and optimize the brain. And as valuable as that is, the research is it's actually the heart that drives optimal human performance. How? Well, let's find out over the next couple of episodes, because our guest for the next 2 episodes is Mark Crowley. He is the author of Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. And his mission is to fundamentally change how we lead people in the workplaces around the globe. Mark Crowley is a leadership pioneer. His work shows us that rather than being weak or soft management, leading from the heart is the most informed and enlightened thing a manager, or for that matter, an organization can do. Mark Crowley is regularly featured. He's a columnist for Fast Company magazine and has been published in USA Today, Reuters, Forbes, Stanford Social Innovation Review, the Financial Times, Huffington Post, Gallup, CEO Magazine, Great Britain, and many other outlets. His book has been taught in no less than 10 American universities, including the educational Ph.D. program at the University of Massachusetts and at the University of Iowa's MBA program. His Lead from the Heart podcast is also featured and an audience of in 163 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the heart leader himself, Mr. Mark Crowley. Yay! And the crowd goes wild, young man.
What a fantastic introduction, Dov. Thank you so very much. Like, what a great setup. Awesome. Really great job.
It's good to have you here, mate. I've been looking forward to our conversation. It feels like it was ages ago since we first spoke, but I've been really looking forward to this because By the way, just in case you want to know, this is a great book. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend that you get it. There's so much good value in it. As you can see, I've got my highlighter wedged in now for where I go in and out of the pages. It's really good stuff. So let's start where we always like to start, especially for somebody like you and I, because we are very focused on that heart center and emotional connection to leadership. What is the origin story of what gives your life meaning? Because for me, leadership is all about meaning, and oftentimes that's where it goes off track because the meaning is up here. So what's the origin story of what gives your life meaning?
So first thing I'll say is that I think we're two brothers from different mothers. So having listened to your podcast and having conversations with you, I have that real deep sense that we are very much aligned in our thinking. How we got there is probably very different. And
sure.
So my origin story, if you will, is more of a tale than it is, a quick condensed story. But basically, what happened in my life very early on is that my mom died suddenly when I was very, very young. And from that point forward, I was raised by my father. And he, for whatever reason, even to this day, I don't think I'll probably go to my own grave, never really fully understanding his motivation to destroy my self-esteem and to really cripple me as a human being. But he did a highly effective job of that by just massive abuse and psychological, emotional abuse, constant yelling, constantly belittling. And when he had me pretty much at the worst state that I could possibly be in terms of just believing in myself, right after high school, he kicked me out of the house without anything. I never saw him again, except for 15 years later when he was dying, and no financial support, no come home for holidays, Sunday night dinners. That was over. And so you can imagine, Dov, that was just, a very unstable way to make your way into the world. And
how old were you when your mom died?
It just turned 9. It was right after my 9th birthday.
So 9, and then high school ends at 17, 18. So you got 9 years with your mom and then 9 years with just your dad. And then your dad is in it. Do you remember him before your mom died? Was he that way before?
Yeah, such a great question, because he was, but what my mom did was to insulate. So I never really felt his wrath because she had to stay away from him, kind of a thing.
So your protector died, and then you're left with the abuser.
Exactly. And it was, came as a complete shock, obviously, because he traveled the world and golfed a lot. And so I think she just said, stay away and let me raise him. And so what ended up happening was I conflated graduating from college as this binary proof that I wasn't the abject failure that he predicted I would be. In other words, he kicked me out of the house, no money, no job, no support, got to go figure it out. Plus, I got to go graduate from college. If I don't, then he was right.
He's right, yeah.
So I kind of figured it out, and the first couple of years were very rough, admittedly, but I got into a rhythm and ended up doing very, very well in school. And I'm working and making a living and kind of keeping into this rhythm. And so when I'm graduating from college, I'm looking at the people around me, and they're all going off to Harvard Business School and medical school and law school. And I'm just feeling, honestly, Dov, like, I'm so pleased that I made it here. Like, this is like the best it's ever going to be. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I pulled it off. I still didn't have any of the confidence because it's just been a struggle for all this time.
Right.
And I started thinking, like, well, what separates me from these people that have the self-belief that they could go and be somebody more than that, right? And I started realizing they were thoughtfully directed. They had somebody in their life that cared about them. They had a safe place to go to, somebody who loved them, somebody encouraged them. So for reasons that I still can't explain, I made a pivot. I got out of college and I started managing people. And on an deeply unconscious level, I made the decision to give people who work for me, all of them, everything that I always believed would have made me infinitely more successful that I didn't get. And so I'm operating with all of this underneath the hood without me realizing it until I'm 43 years old. So basically, almost 20 years of experience of managing people with great success. Like everywhere I went, didn't matter what man or woman, didn't matter age, education, every team I ever managed was doing phenomenally. This woman who worked for me for 20 years said, "You realize you've managed people very differently, right?" Well, it was that stimulus that made me start to realize, wait a minute, like she said, "You're unlike anybody else around here." I was working in financial services, dog eat dog world. Nobody was grinding people, managing with fear and intimidation. And here I'm coming and caring about people, supporting people on the deepest levels. And so I'll fast forward the story to say that what it ultimately, inevitably led me to do was to refine my understanding of what practices truly mattered and influenced people at that deep level. Like, what were they? But a friend of mine said to me, while I was writing the book, I wrote second edition, this came out a couple of months ago, but the first edition 11 years ago, while I was writing it, he said, "You're going to have to explain this, right?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, people are going to think you needed a really shitty childhood in order to lead this way." I had given it zero thought, Dov.
Of course.
Nothing, like never crossed my mind. And I realized, like, he's so right, but I've done none of the work. And what am I going to do? So he goes, "You better figure out like what it was you were doing, like what was the impact, and then go from there." And it was like, like Buddha coming and giving you this great insight, right? I knew he was telling me the truth. I knew there was more work ahead of me, but I started to think like, well, what was it? And I realized like I was affecting the hearts in people.
Right.
So that sounds great, right? Sounds really good. I immediately went to, okay, so I'm going to write a book about heart and leadership, and the people that I used to work with, they're going to go, did he have a religious experience? Did he have a mental breakdown? Like, so I told my wife.
So I either need a shitty childhood or I need a visit from Jesus.
Right. I mean, exactly.
Those are actually the only options.
So I'm like completely screwed at this moment. Right. I'm thinking I've wasted all this time. So at the end of the day, I went and I told my wife, I go, I've just wasted 10 months of my life because nobody's going to take a book about heart and leadership seriously. And the great thing was, if you have a partner in life that really loves you and cares about you, she looked at me and she goes, "Don't you already know it's true? From your own direct experience, don't you already know it's true?" So she goes, "If it's true, there has to be evidence. So why don't you go see if you can find it?" So I went and met with a world-class cardio surgeon and laid out my thesis. Was I affecting the hearts in people? Was I truly? Is that what had happened? And she said, "Mr. Crowley, you're figuring out something that we're just figuring out in medical science ourselves." I went to medical school and I was told the heart is just a carburetor. Don't get caught up in the humanity of it. And she said, but then I started having all these patients come in and they're having to have stents put in their hearts or heart replacement. And I'm doing this surgery and I'm trying to find out what's causing it. And they are going through divorces, they have financial problems, they drink too much, they've gotten bad marriages. She goes, it couldn't be a carburetor, wouldn't respond that way. So there's something human about the heart that's responding to everything. And she said, you've figured out something. She introduced me to an organization called the Institute of Heart Math, and they basically confirmed my whole life experience.
Yeah,
that's my journey.
Yeah, and as you're listening to this, if you don't know the Heart Math Institute, we definitely would encourage you to go read their materials. I wrote about their stuff about 12 years ago. So probably close to the same time as you were doing it, and was fascinated by them when I was studying with Noetic Sciences. And, that's where I got my introduction to Heart Math. And the work is phenomenal. So let's just give everybody a perspective on this so we take it out of the woo-woo. The Heart Math Institute is a scientific institute that has proved the radius of the frequency that the heart puts out. So meaning that there's an energy field that can be measured that goes out from the heart, that it is most intense is 3 feet, but it carries on beyond location. So it's non-local. So it goes on meaning for infinity. But in its intense field is in 3 feet. So as soon as you're close to somebody, you're impacting them. So as a simple example, if you don't believe this, I'm going to give you an example. I want you to sit in front of somebody, anybody, preferably somebody you don't particularly know. And I just want you to sit in front of them, be silent, look them in the eyes. And as you look them in the eyes, I just want you to think, I don't know you, but I love you. That's all I want you to think. I don't know you, but part of me loves you. I don't know you. I don't even understand how I could love you, but I don't need to because some part of me loves you. And just watch how you feel about that after 5 minutes and ask them, how did they feel? They don't know what you're doing, remember? This is one way. You're just doing it to them. Ask them how they feel. Ask them if they're different. If you're a leader and you've got a team member who's a pain in the ass, and who the hell doesn't have one of those, sit them down and say, I want to do an experiment that I read about, that I studied in heart math, whatever it is, and I'd just like to do this with you. And you'll be fascinated with what happens. It's brilliant, brilliant work. And it's the center of this understanding of the heart of leadership, which is what Mark is talking about here. So I want to give you that as an experiment. You can go away and try to understand. So you've got a practicality for it. So now when you imagine doing what Mark was doing, which is leading from that place, rather than from the hard numbers, things begin to change. So you must get confronted with the kumbaya thing all the time, Mark. Tell us about that.
So this is probably 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I was supposed to speak at Amazon, and somebody had read my book and said, like, we've got to do this here. And actually, between us chickens, it's probably the last place that would be responsive to what we're talking about. But nevertheless, they invited me to come speak, right? Sure. So I'm totally excited. Jeff Bezos is going to be in the room. This is going to be an absolutely fantastic experience. So a couple of days before, I get called or an email saying, oh, we've changed the scope of the meeting and we're not going to have any speakers and it's just a different meeting and sorry, we can't have it. So fast forward 3 years later, the person that wanted me to come speak at Amazon now is invited me to speak at Microsoft.
Oh.
And he has somebody else on the call with him. And the person on the call with him, so I'm not first identifying that the person I'm talking to at Microsoft was the same guy at Amazon. Just didn't make the connection.
Oh, I see.
But the other person was trying to do due diligence. And so he said to me, he goes, have you had any resistance to this idea of yours? And I'm like, well, I'll give you an example. I have the suspicion that what happened at Amazon was that they just thought that this was guy going to come on stage and sing Kumbaya and he was going to ruin things. And this other guy goes, I'm that guy. That's exactly what happened. I couldn't tell you at the time, but my boss who worked direct for Jeff Bezos goes, tell me about your speaker. And he goes, he wrote this great book called Lead from the Heart. And the guy goes, can I curse on this show? Is that
absolutely
okay? So he goes, fuck that. We need somebody who knows how to drive performance. And so it's such a great question, Dov, because this is what we assume. We assume that when you care about people, that they're going to get soft around the middle and they're going to take advantage of you and you're not going to hit your goals and it just messes everything up. So I'd rather not get personal with you at all and have any connection with you whatsoever. And it's such a misunderstanding. And this is what they misunderstood at Amazon, was that if they really understood what I was talking about, they would adapt this and adopt this, knowing that it could have great implications on retaining people, making people committed. But we have this bias that you tapped into, which is you hear the word heart, you automatically think it's soft, weak, sentimental, antithetical. Whoever would say it doesn't get business. And so it's a good point for me to remind everyone that I manage stockbrokers, 2,000 stockbrokers who only get paid if they sell something. And we had record performance the very first year that I was running that business. And I've never sold a stock in my life. I had none of the background. I just had the leadership experience. And they said, we think you know how to manage. They never asked me how I managed. But by caring about those people and helping them cultivate greater understanding of how to be effective and knowing that they had somebody who really was an advocate for them, they just exploded, And so such a fantastic question.
Yeah. So you ran the anti-boiler room.
This is how things work in your journey, right?
Of course.
You look at these things and you go, how the hell did that happen? But I had to have that part of the experience in order, actually, before I could be having this conversation with you, I needed to prove to myself that this worked with everyone. Yeah. So at the pinnacle, I'm managing, by the way, so I come in from retail banking environment. We happen to have a brokerage. It wasn't doing very well. The guy who was the president was trying to get the manager of this whole business to comply, and he wasn't doing it. So I get a phone call. How'd you like to go into the securities business and run this business? So the people that I'm coming in, I just got majorly promoted over all of them. They're all thinking that they're the heir apparent. So and I'm coming from a world where I've never sold any of the things that they're selling. So they had like some legitimate reason to look at me, like, who the hell are you? But what they did was they said, we know who you are. And however you managed on the retail bank side, that isn't going to work with these brokers. They want to be left alone. They just want to make money. They don't want to be interfered with. So I got on a plane and I went and met with the top 25 brokers in our company. And they were like, why are you here? And I said, I just really want to get to know you. I want to demonstrate to you that you matter to me and that I'm here to help you. I had 2 of those 25 have tears coming down their eyes. Like I could see it.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what are you experiencing? And they said, nobody's ever done that before. Like you flew to come to me. You didn't have me come to you or meet me in a meeting where we were all going to be. He goes, that alone, nobody was able to do that. And I said, I just want to be your advocate. So tell me how I can help you. So these guys that were working for me were telling me, don't try this, on anybody that works in the brokerage because they're not going to respond to it. Instead, they blossomed. They were so profoundly grateful to have somebody in their court that they knew, like, that guy cares about me. They could feel that, interestingly, to the preface that you made about the heart math work. Yep. They could feel it in their heart with me being in the room, that this is somebody who is not here to bullshit me. This is somebody who came all the way here to demonstrate to me that I matter here. I matter to him. I matter to the organization. And so why wouldn't people flourish and do great work?
So those are great personal analogies, but help people understand that at a research level of getting the most out of people. Like, what is the evidence that if they, I know the stuff in the book, but people who haven't read the book, if they bring someone like you in or start adopting these ideas of being heart-centered in their leadership, what is the logistics, the statistics rather, around the impact and the results?
So the first thing I want to make sure everybody's clear on is that I'm not marginalizing the brain here. I'm not saying, no, the brain has no role here, that we still have to use data and we still have to make tough decisions and do all that. I'm saying that if you bring the heart and the mind together, they're intended by design, natural design, whatever you want to call that, to work together. And in business, we only use one. We've historically said the brain, we want cognitive people, we want the smartest people in leadership. And one of the reasons why people are so unhappy in their jobs is that we haven't hired people who have any interest in really truly caring about people. So I love that you personally have this experience with heart math, because after I wrote the book, so one of the founders mentored me. I was a biology for non-majors guy. So telling me about writing about heart science, I needed somebody to educate me. And so one of the founders did that. But after the book came out, I became very close with Roland McCready, who is one of the other co-founders, but he's their head of research and has been for the last 30 years. So what he said to me, and he asked me to describe just a very casual conversation that ends up with profound insight, right? So he says, just tell me what you did with people. So I said, I developed them, I made them feel safe, I shared information, whatever I knew, whatever I learned, I was doing with them. I wanted to make sure people knew that they had a career path ahead. I was majorly appreciative, expressing my gratitude to them, those kinds of things. And he said, do you realize, he goes, you probably don't realize, but the genius of what you were doing is you were effectively allowing people to marinate in positive emotions. So this became like huge understanding for me that I did not have when I wrote the book originally. What he said is, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And we believed him for 200 years. But we now know, science has proved, and by the way, there have been books just this year come out, profound science to validate this, that we're not the rational beings that we think we are, that we are making up to 95% of our decisions through feelings and emotions. On top of that, he said, we actually are optimal, we perform optimally when we have a ratio experience of at least 4-to-1 positive emotions to negative emotions. Now, you know this. We were talking earlier about being sick on Christmas because life can be difficult, right? Just like things that you don't want to have happen, and normal work experience is stressful. You have goals, you have deadlines, and difficult people to work with. So the minute you show up at work, whether that's virtually or in an office, you're already experiencing negative emotions. So what he said was, when you make people feel valued, when you make them feel mattered, when you make them feel supported and safe, all those kinds of things, you are giving them a positive emotion offset that allows people to perform optimally. And if they don't get that offset, you're limiting their performance. So he said, unconsciously, because you've admitted that to me, he goes, I can't give you all the credit, that, basically what you did by accident was to support people in the most ideal way, because they're just having a constant, they're like, I think he said it, or if he didn't, the implication was people are naturally marinating in positive emotions. And we human beings, and Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill has reconfirmed this, that we human beings are hardwired, come into the world, hardwired to thrive on positive emotions. So when we don't get them, that's where disengagement comes from. Like, I have a boss that never says thank you. I have no idea where this career is going here. Nobody ever says this work matters. Nobody makes me feel like, if there's a downturn tomorrow, that I won't be the first one out of this company on a layoff. All of these kinds of things. And so he said, you have basically done everything that leaders should be doing, and you did them based on your upbringing.
That's brilliant. We are already at the end of part one of the show. Wow. We're going to get into part two, but just to sort of back up and validate what you're just saying, Antonio Damasio, who is a neuroscientist, said in his research, he was able to show that emotions. So we think, a lot of time when we think about decision making, we go, oh, that's very nice. You got to support people and be kind to them. And yeah, we get that, but it's got nothing to do with decisions. And so Antonio Damasio, as I said, neuroscientist, shows that emotions are enmeshed in the neural network of reason. You can't make a decision. You can't come to a place of reason without emotions being enmeshed in that process. It's in the neural network. So if you don't create that environment, and I'm not going to say positive, because honestly, I don't even like that term positive emotions, because it's got so many weird connotations for me. But if you don't place people in an environment where they feel nurtured and cared about, right? Once you do that, it changes everything. You cannot see the world differently. It's easy to be cynical, of course, But when somebody is nurturing and loving to you, they can be positive, and you can go, oh, they're all sunshine and roses and all bullshit, but maybe behind doors, they're different. But when somebody's genuinely nurturing to you the way you were with those people can't deny that. They can be suspicious, but they can't deny it. They can't go, yeah, it's fake, because it's real. And we feel that in a very real sense. And that process is at every level of the brain. That process is in all three parts of the brain: the midbrain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the logic center, and the old brain, right? It all goes, oh, something's, and the guards drop away and people feel valued. It's incredibly important. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you sharing that. In part 2 of the show, I want to get into the application of this, because it's very important. And I particularly want to get into the application of it in the context of, we had COVID. People came back. There was a boom. Then we had the Great Resignation, people walking away, quiet quitting. And now we're on the brink of what appears to be potentially a global recession. There could be all kinds of problems. That's a lot of up and downs. I wrote a lot about it myself. I know you have. I've written about how normal is over, and it was over, like COVID was the killing of all that. I want to talk about this in that context, when stress levels, anxiety levels, and financial woes are at the high. I want to talk about what this really means for us and how we can use it as leaders and for ourselves and our families. So we're going to be back in part 2 of the show, and we'll talk more about that. Before we go, please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you, Mark, and about your books, and about all the processes and all the value that you bring to people.
Oh, thank you. I think the easiest way is markccrowley.com. Remember the C? There's actually another Mark Crowley out there, so I had to add the C 12 years ago. markccrowley.com. All roads lead to Rome. You can find my Twitter handle, LinkedIn, all of that, markccrowley.com.
All right, and we will make sure that those links, of course, are published in the show notes. So if you don't catch that, it's fine. We'll make sure it's there. And by the way, in case you're on Twitter, Mark C. Crowley, there's a big following there. Mark is very active on Twitter. Yeah, there's still some sane people on Twitter, and Mark is one of them, making a massive difference. So I highly recommend it. I engage with his work a lot on there, and it's really excellent. All right, we're going to be back in just one click. Till then, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how your heart can make a massive difference in leadership. We'll see you in just one click. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.